We are very lucky today on the Damage Report to be joined by one of, I'm told by Republicans, one of the most dangerous individuals in America. Representative Zooey Zephyr, welcome to the program.
Thank you, I'm so happy to be here.
Very glad to have you here. Very glad to have you speaking anywhere that you are still allowed to speak, considering how you've been treated by your colleagues there. Our audience is at this point very well aware of the trials and tribulations that you've undergone since you passionately spoke out against some of the insane and barbaric bills being passed in your state. I know that a lot has happened in terms of your attempt to, sort of appeal through the judicial system. Can you update us a little bit on what your status is, what you're allowed to do, and what's currently happening?
So that appeal was made for a temporary restraining order because we were going to hear the biggest bills going forward in the legislature. And every day that went by, there were 11,000 Montanans, my constituents, whose voices weren't being heard in the debate portion. So we filed for that temporary restraining order to get me back into the House. Unfortunately, that was denied and the House adjourned. Sine die, the session is over as of late last night. And as soon as sine die happened, I was allowed back in. I walked back in and hugged my colleagues and talked about what's next. What is the work to come?
So that is fascinating. So they weren't supposed to end the session at that point. You're saying that there was important work to be done. Was this some sort of legislative Hail Mary? Why exactly did things go down in this particular way?
So, well, I particularly, I would say the session was supposed to end on Friday, but often sessions end slightly early because the one goal of the legislature, its prime goal is to pass the state budget bill. And as soon as the budget bill is through, there are other bills that we're working on, and sometimes we finish them and sometimes they die in process. And I think here, what we saw is as soon as House Bill 2, the budget bill passed, people wrapped up and went home.
Yeah, 100%. By the way, as we're speaking, I'm seeing our chat and a lot of people are very excited to see you here, excited that you have not been in any way cowed by the experience that you've gone through. I think you probably don't need to be told what an inspirational figure you've rapidly become on the national stage. So thank you, not only for your initial comments, which rightly were the talk of the country, but the way that you have fought back at every turn against what the Republicans in your state have been attempting to do. So following your attempted appeal, where exactly do we go from here? What recourse do you have at this point? How do you see things shaking out going forward?
So it's important to address right away that I believe the court's decision not to immediately reinstate me was a miscarriage of justice. Legislators' rights to free speech do not vanish when we are elected, and constituents deserve a right to representation. If they do not have that, the very fabric and underpinnings of our country are gone. And so I am working to represent my community within the legislature. And if I can't be allowed to do that there, I was working to do it in the courts. And if it can't be successful there, we will work to organize in our communities at the ballot box to make sure that going forward, my constituents have the representation that they deserve.
Is I'm like sort of trying to play in my head how like future sessions, obviously you will not immediately be allowed back in once it comes back into session. I would assume if you were to run for re-election and be re-elected, are there any triggers that allow you to bypass outside some other intervening force the weird situation they have you in terms of what you're allowed to do, where you're allowed to go?
So the motion made by the majority leader was that I was barred from those locations until, and I quote, the 68th legislature adjourns sine die. So as of 9 p.m. last night, that censure is no longer in effect. I walked back into that room. I went to my seat and I talked to my communities. And if I get reelected and here in 2025, my expectation is that I will sit in my desk and I will be able to represent the constituents who elected me.
Okay, well then that's awesome news. I think a lot of people are going to be very glad to hear that. I would assume that they are going to be on the lookout for any opportunity to once again target you. So it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to choose carefully like what issue you stress that they use as the excuse to bar you. But I know that you probably will use the opportunity well. consider, I had one person in the audience asked, considering how I think very reasonable the initial comments that you made were. I think that the reason that they freaked out in the way that they did is because you really touched a nerve. You pointed out the massive gap between what they were doing and what their stated religious and political values are. Would you, if you knew that even that would get you into the position you were in, would you have gone even harder? Was there any more that you wished to say? Because they say that you had no respect for decorum. If you really didn't care about the decorum, was there anything else that you would have said?
Well, I would say first and foremost, they are using decorum. They've been applying decorum unequally in various circumstances. People have insinuated that somehow my being trans, just by that fact that I'm somehow a threat to children, that has been insinuated on the House floor, and decorum was not utilized there. So they're using decorum as a cudgel. They're using the tools of a political system to quiet dissent, to say it's not enough to get these bills across, but you need to be silent. We saw that here, we saw that in Tennessee, in Oklahoma, and across the country as authoritarianism is mounting within our state legislatures. But that said, my words, I chose them precisely. I chose them carefully. And it is exactly what I meant to say. These bills get people killed. And as a legislature, we have to be held accountable for the results that come when we press that green yes button or that red no button.
Thank you for your advocacy. Where can people follow your work, what you're trying to do?
You can find me at Zoandbehold, ZOANDBEHOLD on any social media platform that exists, or email my Ledge email and I'll say hello.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Representative. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.